All right, so I'm now in the Tajima Writer Plus software. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go up to Help. And when you go to About Writer Plus, this is where you're going to find your version of the software. So we're in build 7821 right now. And if you've had your dealer dongle upgraded in the last couple of months, you should be at the correct software. So the next thing I want to do is go up to Edit. And we're going to go to Settings. You want to make sure that Show Punch Tools is checkmarked so that that is activated. These are your digitizing tools, and this is what's going to open those tools up in your software for you. You can also go to Units, and if you go, now we can select inches or millimeters, and I like to work in inches, so I have mine selected as inches. All right, so the next thing that I want to do is go up to Edit, and let's go to Select Hoop. So this is where you're going to find your hoop. So we have the standard hoop, we have the small hoop and the large hoop. Those are the two hoops that came with the machine. And if you click on Optional Hoop, it's going to show you in the drop-down menu all the different optional hoops that you can purchase for your machine. So you've got your cap hoop, magnetic hoop, and then there's some other hoops here. Now the cap hoop and the magnetic hoop, we're going to talk about those at our next training, at our advanced training. We had so much to put in this training. I just thought it was best if I'd leave the cap hoop and the magnetic hoops to the advanced training that we'll talk to you about at the end of this one when we're going to schedule that one. So for this one, we're going to use the standard hoop. And I am going to select the large hoop, the tubular, okay? And it brings it into the screen. Now you can go up here and fit to screen, and I'm also using the wheel on my mouse so I can zoom in so you can see this much better. So the first thing that we want to do is talk about the icons. So over on the left, you have a new page or a new design you're going to work with. You can open a design from something that you saved on your computer. You can save. We have the output to machine, and this is what you would use if you're doing the direct connect with the Ethernet cord, and we'll cover that in our advanced training. And then we have the output to USB, and right now this is being used for the commercial multi-head machines. Then we have our Add Design. This is where all of our designs are located that are built into the software. We have Writer, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We have Undo and Redo, Cut, Copy, and Paste. And you may notice, one thing I forgot, let me go to View. And we want to make sure all of our toolbars are turned on. So I go up and make sure everything is turned on. Go to Toolbars and make sure all of those are checked. And that way, everything that I have to work with in the software is visible to me. But we have more tools over here than we can actually display. So you're going to see a toolbar that has like this white broken line on it. And if you left click, hold on your mouse and drag, you can bring that toolbar up. With any of these, if you click on these, the dotted line, you can rearrange these toolbars on your screen. So now I have more tools down here that we'll talk about as we use them. At the top of, let me go down to the bottom and go through that. I have to move my control panel here. So at the bottom, we have 3D. You can view it in 3D. You can turn the grid on or off, the hoops on or off. This is slow redraw. We do have our thread palettes here. This is our thread palette, and we have options here that we will work with. So at the top, we have our Select tool. And when you click on the down arrow, we can select, or we can choose what's called a Vertex Select, and we'll work with this. Some of you may be familiar with under another name, and I call them nodes. In other software, they call them nodes, but this is your tool that you can work with stitches. We have our angle lines tool, and we have our slice lines tool. We have select all, and Control A on your keyboard will also select all. We have zoom, pan, delete, fit to screen, zoom in. We have text we're going to work with. We also have, these are our digitizing tools. Now, if you did not select the show punch tools in the settings, you will not have this icon. So if that has been checked and turned on, you will have all of your digitizing tools. We have our complex fill. We have the satin stitch. The steel is a line satin stitch. We have our running stitch, and we have our manual punch tools, and we will work with those. We have auto digitizer. We have photo stitch, and we have sketchbook, and we will go through those. So the first thing I want to do is go over and open a design that's actually built into the software. So if I go over to the star and click on Add Design, these are all of the categories of the built-in designs that are in the software. If you go to Browser, this is where you can locate a design that you've saved on your computer. So we're going to go back to Categories. And there's some really nice patterns built into this machine. You should take the opportunity and stitch some of these out. There's some really cute ones. And a lot of things that maybe you overlook that would stitch out really nice if you edited them and added some things to them. So for today, we're going to go to Celebrations. And we're going to choose the candle, and we're going to select it. And it brings it into the center of my hoop. Now I'm going to enlarge this so that we can actually see it as we're doing things to it, and you can see it better on the screen. So to enlarge, all you need to do is left click on your mouse, left click, hold, and drag on any of the four corners, and you can proportionally enlarge the design. And I'm going to move it back to the hoop. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, I hope it went over there. Let me select it again. If you look at the lower left of my screen, you can see it tells me how many stitches are in the design, how many colors, and the size of the design. And I am working in inches, so it's showing it in inches. So if I want to unproportionally enlarge it or reduce it, I can click on the top boxes or any of the side boxes, and I can change it that way as well. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice it is changing the stitch count for me and showing me the new size that I'm working with. So I think you can see this pretty good today, and we'll go work with it. So the first thing I want to do is work with the colors and work with some of the properties of the design. But in order to do that, I need to go over to my sequence window and open the properties and the sequence window. To the right is a white arrow, and when you click on that, your properties box opens up and your sequence box opens up. Now, the other thing that I want to do, I'm going to click on sequence, is I want to work individually with parts and pieces of this design, but right now it's all grouped together into one design. In our segment window that was hidden down here, we now have ungroup is lit up and it's available. So when I click ungroup, you'll see now that all of those parts and pieces have been ungrouped, and now I can work with them individually. This is our stitching order, and these are the colors that it's going to stitch out in. So I want to go over and work with some stitches on one of these patterns. So let me zoom in a little bit more. So I'm going to go over to my sequence window and click on the red bow. And if I go to properties, now I can work with the stitches. And a lot of this is just playing around. I don't ever mess with the run style, however you can. The stitch style, you can change that. I'm just going to leave all of that alone. You can change your stitch length. Most of these I let the software determine for me, and it works. I don't need to go in and change any of that. But what I do want to change is the pattern fill. And down here you'll see pattern fill, And if you click on the down arrow, you're going to get all of these different fill patterns that you can choose. So you can click on one, and I think you can see what's happening on my screen. See how that fill pattern is changing on that bow? And I'll click on a couple more. So when I started working with software, this was fun. I just really enjoyed doing this. And I actually worked with a girl who took every one of the fill patterns and created a box and put a different fill pattern in each box and stitched it out, so that when someone came in to look at the machine, she had this book and she could go over and show them the different fill patterns that they could get simply by changing it here. So maybe something you might want to consider. And I can change any of the other properties of this that I want. Let me go put this back so you can see a little more. So if I wanted to go up to the candle area here and change it, I could. But that's the only one I want to work with. I just wanted to change the fill pattern for the bow. So the other thing that people want to do in software is they want to change their colors. So I'm going to go back to the sequence window. So I'm back in the sequence window, and again, I said, this is my stitch out order, my sequence, the way it's going to stitch on the machine. And I want to use these colors, but you know what, on the bow, I want to use a different color. So down here, we actually have our color palette. And what it shows, there's a couple options here. I'm going to go click on the 3 lines. And when I click on Design Palette, it is showing me the colors that are currently in my design. So these colors now match this because that's what's in the design, but I'm going to change that. If I click on Machine Palette, these are the colors I used on a previous design. And if I click on Thread Palettes, this is where I can go select the threads that I want to work with. And I'm going to do that in just a minute. I'm going to just show you that's what that is. So the first thing I want to do is go back to the Design Palette, because that matches what you see on the screen. Now I want to take the bow, and I want that bow, I've selected it, and I want it to be blue. So now I'm going to go down and go to my thread palettes, and I can select any of these brands. Now these are the most used brands, and we all know that this changes daily. One company will go out of business and another company will come into the embroidery thread business. So I don't really worry about working with the brand, but you can. So I'm going to go back up, and I'm just going to choose the Isacord, the 40 weight Isacord. And you'll see now that at the bottom in the color palette, these are all the Isacord colors. There are a lot of Isacord colors that you can go through. But if you hover your mouse over one of the colors, you'll see the number of the thread and the name of the thread. So if you are someone who wants to match a particular thread to the particular color and stitching out, you can do this. I am not that picky about, you know, we all have different brands of threads in our sewing studio, and I'm sure you as a dealer sell different brands of threads. So I don't worry about picking a particular brand, however you can. So if I go back to the 3 lines and go to thread palettes, there's one called AutoCAD, and that's sort of like just a bunch of colors. I don't worry about the shading or any of that. So I can pick a color from here. So I want a blue, and there you can see over here that I have now changed my thread color to blue. And the berries that are here, I want those to stitch out red. So now my colors are changed, and this is still my stitching order, but I've changed my colors. So now when I go back to my design palette, these are the colors that I'm working with. They're not in order over here. We're going to do that in a minute. This just shows me the colors that I have chosen to work with in this pattern. And the next thing we're going to do is set the color to the machine needles. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to tell the machine what color I'm using on which needle. So I'm going to go up to Machine, and I'm going to go to Needles. And this is the color palette. Now this is what I had used before, so nothing here matches, but it will in a minute. So if you click on the color box, now I have all of my thread colors again, and I can go pick the brand if I want to do that. I'm just going to leave it at Isacord and pick the color. So the first color in my design is a lighter yellow, so I'm just going to leave it as Lemon. And you can see that over here. So I'm going to click on needle number 2. So I'm telling the software what color I'm actually going to put on the machine on which needle. So I hope that you can, I hope that you understand that. So I'm just telling the software now what color thread I'm going to be putting on the machine and which needle I'm going to be putting it on. So when you click on the needle number 2, now that's a little bit darker, sort of a golden yellow. So I'm going to click on that and select it. Needle number 3 is a different yellow. It's a little bit brighter than what I had before. Needle number 4 is green, so I'm going to leave that as forest green. Now, when I click on needle number 5, that's a darker green. I'm just going to leave it as black here, but you could go through your thread colors and find like a darker forest green or an emerald green or something really darker, but I'm just going to leave it black for today. Color number 6 is my blue, because that is what I changed. So I can go over here and go to the AutoCAD, which is what I use, pick the blue and select it. So color needle number 7 is going to be red. And then needle number 8 is going to be a gold. And it can be one of these up here that you've previously used. So I really wouldn't necessarily have to put a thread on needle number 8. I could just go into the machine and say, I want you to pull from needle number 2, that thread color when you're stitching this out. But for today's exercise, we're going to go change all of them so that the colors will match. So I've told the software, these are the colors that I'm going to put on my machine. And I'm going to click OK. And I'm going back now and click on the design palette, and you'll see these have changed. It now matches what I actually have told the machine I wanted to use. Now, if you are going to connect this, and this will be in our advanced. When we do a direct connect, we can show you some things with the colors. But for today, I'm just going to go ahead and show you how to change it in the software. And then when we get over to the screen, we will actually go in and assign the needles to the thread colors in the screen. So if we have this, and we are ready to save this design. Any questions before I save this? So to save the design, you can either go to the save icon or you can go up to File, Save As, and we're going to save this on a USB stick. And I just need to unhook a camera and put in it my USB stick. So over on the left, you're going to select the USB drive. And now we're ready to save this. So the first way that you want to save your pattern is as a PXF file. If I click on the down arrow, I can save as anything I want. We have so many options here. But the first thing you want to do is save as a PXF. That is actually, it's the Pulse embroidery file. This is your true file, your working file. Pulse actually makes this software, and that's why it's called Pulse Embroidery Files. But if you want to go back and do something to this design later, you always want to save it as this. And then when you go back and edit, all of your editing capabilities will come back. When you save it as a stitch file, which we will do next, you may lose some of your editing capabilities when you come back to your design to work with it. So always save it as a PXF, that's your file, and we're just going to call it candle. And we're going to save it as a PXF. Now the next thing you want to do is save it as a stitch file. It will not stitch as a PXF, that's just a working file. So now you can come back and click the down arrow, but for the Tajima, we're going to use the DST, the Tajima stitch files. Almost every sewing machine on the market nowadays will read a DST file as well. And this is your stitch file. So we're going to save it as that, we're going to name it candle, and we're going to save it. All right, so we're ready to take the USB to the machine and stitch it out. All right, I'm going to go get a new page. And I want to show you a feature that was in the new update, which is mirror image. So I'm just going to go over and go back to the celebrations folder, and I'm going to choose the light bulb, or the Christmas bulb. And I'm going to enlarge it so you can see. And I want to copy and paste one of these. So I can go down to copy and paste. And it's nice that it doesn't throw this on top of the other one. Some softwares do that. It actually throws it over here so you can see that you've truly copy and pasted. And now I can select the one that I want to work with. When I select it and I'm back in the segment toolbar, you'll notice now that it's called reflect, but it's mirror image. That's activated. When I click on that, I have all of these options of how I want to mirror image this. So click on the circle in front and OK, and you'll see it's mirror imaged it. There's a lot of options here. You can click on the different ones to see what you want. And you can rotate mirror image and work with your designs that way. All right, so I just wanted to show you quickly how to mirror image on here and just go through some of those. All right, so that's mirror image. All right, if there's no questions on that, we're going to go to digitizing and work with some of our digitizing tools. I'm just going to close some of these windows. You can work with multiple windows open. I don't like to have a lot up here, but I'll go ahead and close them out and get a new page. All right, so the first thing I want to show you is auto digitizing, and that is the little wand up here. When you click on it, it's going to ask you to go select your image. And it's going to take you to your computer. Now you need to go to where you have previously got this image and where you have saved it. So mine is saved in pictures. So you want to have gotten your image. It's a JPEG image, wherever you typically get those. And we're going to open that. A bitmap, a JPEG, it'll open them all. Select it and open it. And there's my picture. This is just a picture right now. It doesn't have stitches to it. Next, and we can trace. So we can trace all of the components of the picture, or we can just trace the outline. If we want to create a quilting shape and we just want the outline of that, we can certainly trace just the outer shape only, turn it into a running stitch, and now we have a quilting stitch that matches our pattern. So I'm going to do trace all next. And here is my photo. It shows you the size, and I prefer to work in inches. So it's a 4x4 design. If you want to increase this, you need to take your picture into another program like Paint or Photoshop and increase it there, and then save it and bring it in. The icons here at the bottom will let you mirror image or rotate your picture before you work with it, and then click Next. Now these are the colors that the software has picked up in the design, and if your pattern has a lot of different shading, it may pick up 20 or 30 different shades, and that's really not what you want. So up here you have a slider bar, and if you click on that, you can slide this down to adjust the colors. So if you had a design that had like 20 colors in it, and a lot of those are just shading, you may want to move the threads down and do less colors. So this is something you just kind of have to work with and play with. You can see now I just have 4. I can take it all the way down, and it's monochromatic. It's one color it's going to stitch out. So that's something you just work with to determine how you want it to stitch, and I'm going to take it back to 7. Now over on the palette, this is pretty cool. If you choose Isochord, it actually finds the closest match to the Isochord colors. So here's the Isochord numbers, and here are the names. A lot of people now are using glide threads. I'm going to go down to glide. There's your glide numbers and the number of the color. So that's pretty cool for people who have a hard time picking out colors or knowing what to use. The software can actually tell you the color number to use, and that's a big help, especially to beginners. Sometimes it's a help to me, even though I've been digitizing for years. We're going to go to Next. You can change this. You can change your running stitch length. I typically do not change any of this. The one I might consider changing, and we'll work with this later and you'll see the difference, is the width of the satin stitch. I typically like to use 0.04. It's a more narrow satin stitch, and it's just a preference, but I don't usually change it here because I can go in the software and make adjustments once I have my design digitized. I'm going to go to Next. Sequencing order, I want to minimize my color change. Trim, I always like to trim. I always want my threads to trim. You can tell it how close or how far apart before it trims. I usually leave it at the default setting. Lock stitch, I always want mine to lock stitch, so I change that to always. Over here are different fabrics that the software is asking you, what are you going to be stitching on? And what this does, so if I choose canvas, that's a heavier fabric. What this does is it tells the software how much underlay to put under the stitching. The nice thing about commercial software is they really put underlay stitching under it to support those stitches. If you look at some of the other softwares, when it starts to stitch, it might take 2 or 3 what they call underlay stitches, and then it starts to do the design. So there's really nothing there that supports those stitches. But in this software, it actually creates more underlay, especially when we get into our text. And there's a professional underlay that they put in there. So if I'm using canvas, it's going to need less underlay stitches because that's a thick fabric. If I choose silk, it's going to need more underlay stitches because that fabric needs more support to handle all the stitches that you're going to give it. So when you're creating a design, it is important that you choose this so that the software will do all the work for you. It'll add the stitches that are needed and you'll get nice results. So I'm just going to choose normal and I'm going to choose next. And it is now digitized and I'm going to choose finish and my pattern has come up. And there is my digitized flower. Now, a lot of digitizers that I've talked to, and me included anymore, a lot of them will let the software auto-digitize it. And then they'll go back and they'll fix what they don't like. And that's typically what I do. I've tried to digitize from scratch, and we'll show you how to do that. It takes a lot of time. I can let the software do its thing, and most of the time it does a pretty good job. I don't have to go back and do a whole lot to it. But I let the software do it, and now I can go back and clean it up. So that's what we're going to do next. So if you'll notice, there's these little purple buds here that have come up that were on the picture, and I don't want those. I want to delete them. So I'm just going to go up and make sure I have my select tool, and I'm going to go click on that little purple bud, and I'm touching the delete key on my keyboard, and I can actually go take any of those little things away that I do not want to stitch. You could stitch them. I just don't see a purpose. I think they're going to disappear in the stitching. So I can delete that. I could also click on any of these other areas. Maybe I want to delete it off. I don't want it to stitch. So if I have this area here, so I'm going to select this area here. You'll notice the software has brought it in as a different color. I might want to go back and change it so that it matches the purple here, or I might want to stitch it as yellow and just change it to a different color altogether. I can also go over to my properties and change the fill pattern, which we had that option. So I can change it from a satin stitch to one of the fill patterns, or I could delete it totally. So you can work with that individually and change it. I'm going to undo because I want to get that back to the color it was. So there's other things when you look at this, it's like, well, this doesn't look very pretty when I would go to stitch this out. So I want to work with this. And this is where we get into what we call in this software the vertex. So I'm going to click on, wrong one. I'm going to click on the Vertex Select tool. And you will see all of these red triangles come up. And these are what I'm going to use to adjust my stitches. Now there's, I'm going way back in the days of digitizing. So this is, we're actually working with true stitches, but it's more like pictures of stitches. Instead of working with each individual stitch, we're working with an area of stitches. And this to me is much simpler than trying to work with each individual stitch. I mean, you could spend days just getting one area set. So we're going to work with an area. And I've worked with other softwares and they call these nodes. So this is the same thing. If you're trying to select, right now I have select all, so I have these around everything. If you're trying to just work with a particular area, you can go over to your sequence window and I could grab all the purple flowers or just the black that's there and work with that. But I'm going to leave it on select all. So all you need to do is zoom in, grab one of these and pull it, and you'll see what's happening. You see how I'm changing those stitches? And that's too fat. I'm going to bring that in. And this is not enough, so I'm going to bring that out. I'm going to click on this one and bring it in. So you can actually go and customize this exactly the way you want it. Get up here to the other part. Let me get back over to this petal here and show you some things. So right here, I don't like the way any of this looks, but maybe right here, this looks pretty good, but maybe I want to work with this. There are no red triangles. There's no vertex here for me to work with. If I put my mouse over an area and right click, I can add a vertex. And now I can actually adjust that. So even though it didn't give you an area to work with, I can take this down here, move it out. I can right click and add a vertex, and now I have another one that I can work with. Hopefully you can see how that's changing on there. Now, if you And sometimes when I'm doing this, it's like, oh, there's just way too many things here, too many areas. You can right click and delete one of those and it can change your stitches as well. So when I delete, sometimes it's like, oh, I didn't like that. Let me go back and redo that. So you can add a vertex. Go back to my Control A. I can pull this up here. I can pull this, and I am zoomed way in on this right now. So know that you're really looking close up, whereas when we reduce this down, you won't see these white spaces. But hopefully you can see what I'm doing there. Do you get that? This is a tool I use a lot, so I can change and alter anything I don't like that the software did for me. Any questions on auto digitizing and working with cleaning this up? All right, so the next thing I want to do, I'm going to go get a new one. And now I'm going to digitize. I'm actually going to get a picture and start from scratch. So when we go up to image, I'm going to load an image. A little different than auto digitizing. I'm going to go back. I'm going to use the same flower and open it. Again, if you wanted to resize this, do it in Paint or some other program and bring it in as the new size. So right now it's just a picture. There's no stitches. I'm going to go add my stitches. If we go up to our digitizing tools and I go to complex fill, this is our fill stitch that you see on most embroidery machines. So I'm going to zoom in good so you can see me do this. And I am left clicking with the mouse. You can see the crosshairs. I'm putting it where I want to start. Left click. I'm going up here and left click. Now, when I come down and go around a curve, you right click and you'll see how this will follow that curve. When I get to a point, I am left clicking. I'm going down here, left click. Now I'm going around a curve, so I'm right clicking with my mouse. I get to a point, I left click. I go back up and I am right clicking. I connect them and left click. And now I'm touching enter on my keyboard. And look, I have digitized a flower petal. Was that easy? Again, you can go into properties and you can change your pattern feel. You can change some things. You can go down and change the color. Maybe I'm going to do a pink flower. I can change the color. So that's how easy it is to do a complex fill. You choose your tool. You go down and you outline it. Now, right now, you can see the picture. But if I want to look at it without, I have to move my zoom toolbar up here. If you go back to image and uncheck show, the picture goes away, and this is what your embroidery stitches are going to look like. So let me go back and turn that on. So the next one over here, I want to do this. I want this to be a satin stitch. So we're going to use a different tool. Click satin, and let me zoom in so you can see. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm left clicking. Now I'm doing a right click and I'm right clicking around the curve. I get to the bottom and I left click. This is pretty straight. I can left click or I could right click and go around that slight little curve there, but left click and hit enter. But look, nothing happened. All I have is an outline shape. The software, you see the little circle on the end of my pointer? The software is waiting on you to tell it what direction you want the satin stitch to go. Do I want it to go in this direction? Do I want it to be in this direction? Do I want it to be at an angle? That is up to you. Keep in mind when you are digitizing, you can digitize a satin stitch as large as you want. The machine will probably do it. but it will slow the machine down because that machine's going to have to travel from one side way over to the other side to create that. And that's true in any software. It will really slow the machine down. So just be mindful when you're creating a satin stitch that you're not asking the machine to do something it really wasn't intended to do to make a 5-inch satin stitch. So I'm going to put it right here, and I left click and hold and drag it down to where I want my angle to be. You see, I can change my angle. I'm still holding the mouse, and I'm going to let go. Now I'm going to touch enter on the keyboard, and there's my satin stitch. So that's how you create a satin stitch. Are we good on your end? Everybody still good? All right, so I'm going to go through these other tools just kind of quick. Steel is an outline satin stitch. So when you select it, and I now go around, I'm going to go around, I'll go around this one here. I'm going to start down here. Left click, left click, left click, right, 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 and left click. Enter on the keyboard, and there's my satin stitch. So what that tool does is creates your satin stitch. But this is where, when I was talking about auto digitizing, I don't like these real heavy satin stitches. So if you go to your properties box and you go to the width, if you click here, I like to use 0.04, and I'm hitting enter on the keyboard. See how it changed the width of that satin stitch? And if I wanted it even smaller, I can put in a smaller number and hit enter. So that's how you can adjust your satin stitch on there. So the other tool is your run stitch. This is your triple straight stitch, if you want to call it that. And I'll just left click, right click around the curve. And just for today, I'm going to go from there to here and then back up to here. Enter on the keyboard, and I'm going to change it so you can see a better color. Well, that didn't work. About a red. And there's my running stitch. When I digitize, I do not use a satin stitch to outline the design. If I outline it, I use the running stitch. So over here, you can go change your stitch style. You could change the stitch length. Maybe this is too big, you want it shorter. Remember, you're looking at a zoomed picture, so when we go in, it's really not that long of a stitch length. And so that's how you get like your triple straight stitch to outline with. And then the final one, wrong one. The final one is your manual punch tools. And if you're a person who wants to actually set each stitch, I am just left clicking here and going back and forth. They call this punching, manual punch. There may be some other words for it as well. I do know digitizers that use this method. And now I'm going to hit enter on the keyboard, and you see I'm creating my own fill stitches. This takes a lot of time, but professional digitizers that sell their designs a lot of them will manual punch. So you have that option in this software. So those are our digitizing tools. That is the digitizing tools and how you use those.
Okay. So the next thing I want to go to is photo stitch. So I'm going to go get a new page, and I'm going to go to photo stitch. And the first thing it's going to ask you to do here is go select your image. So again, you would want to have picked your image. You could do this with a regular photo, something you got off the internet. I'm going to go and select, I downloaded just a picture of John Wayne. Who doesn't like John Wayne, right?
Yeah.
So it brings the picture in, and then you have to decide how you want to stitch it. Now, the first thing is our width. Well, you can't stitch a 10 by 12, so I'm going to go to the width, and I'm going to change the width to 7 inches. I have inches here, and I'm going to change the height I could have let it came in at like 9. So I'm going to go to 9. Hold on a minute, I'm looking at something on the screen. All right, so now I have a 7 by 9. Now crop type, it's a rectangular, that's where it's going to come in. Colors, now this is where you have to decide how you want this stitched out. I typically like between 4 and 6 colors. You can test it to see how many colors you want. I'm going to put it at, I'll leave it at 6 for this. And then we have our modes down here. So if I go, I can do a color. I can do gray, which this will come up all grays. I can do the sepia, which I like. That's the one I actually like to use. The CMYK, the edge, the mono. I'm going to choose the sepia. And I'll use it as stippling. I tried doing it with hatching. I think that's just straight lines, so I'll leave it as the stippling. And you're going to click OK. And it's now going to digitize that for me and bring it into my hoop. It can take a minute depending on the size. And you see it's thinking, and there is my photo stitch. Now, we can go back and play with this and change it and add more colors, but for today, yeah, I think you can see what this does, and you can decide if you want to bring it in as color or a grayscale. But I need to rotate this because obviously it's not going to stitch in the hoop that way. So I'm just going to get my select tool, and you will see there is a rotate icon here, and I can rotate this in my hoop. And now I'm ready to take this and stitch it out. So Photo Stitch comes in our software. It's not an add-on. It's included in the software, which is included with the machine. So the next one I want to talk about is Sketchbook. I'm going to go get a new page. And Sketchbook. Now, Sketchbook is something that has always been in our software. It's never anything where you've had to pay. If we ever do updates on our software, everything is free. We don't charge you for extras. So Sketchbook has always been here. Now, there are other manufacturers now that have come out with a standalone Sketchbook that they charge for. There's several $100s that they charge for. So this is a nice added value for our software. It's already built in. But this is actually a drawing tool. So over here are your tools. If you click on the pen, tapered ends, and I'm just going to go over here and I'm using the mouse and I'm just going to draw so you can kind of see what it looks like. I can go down here and change the width. So let me just get a bigger one so you can see. So there's your tapered ends. I can go to calligraphy, and this one is really nice if you actually, and I'm not a very good drawer, so excuse me, but you can actually get a calligraphy look. We have pressure sensitive. We have a satin stitch. Remember, the steel is the satin stitch. We have a running stitch, so if you want to draw a running stitch. And then we have just a regular run stitch. But once you, I'm going to go back to the satin stitch. You now can click on the width of your pen. So if I click this, you'll see the satin stitch is thick. And this is a drawing tool. This is not a digitizing tool where you're going to go and do a fill stitch. You're going to outline something. You can take any of your photos and just outline them. Now, I know you can't see, but I actually have a stylus that is one of the electronic ones that you can recharge. And if you use a stylus and you have a touch screen on your computer, or if your computer has a touch screen, you can get more accuracy when you're drawing. I'm using the stylus now. So you can see I can get more accuracy, and I can go up and change. So this is a fun program to play with. At Houston Market last year, we set our computer up with our machine, and we let people come by and use their finger and write their name on the computer screen, and then we stitched out their quilt label with their name, and it was a hand signature name. So this is a nice one to play with. I have seen samples of a cityscape that was drawn. So you can go in and load your image. Again, bring in an image, load it, and then you can trace around that image. So I'm just going to go get an image that I have, just so you can see that, because this is a very bonus that we get in our software that I know a lot of us don't really work with. I'm going to go over and Zoom doesn't like me today.
Hey, and class.
So I'm going to go over and get one of the drawing tools. So let me just, I'm going to use the running stitch. And one thing I didn't show in the Satin Stitch, let me go back to that. You can also change the density. So if you want the stitches closer together or further apart, you know, we use different weights of thread when we're doing this. We can change the density. So I'll go back and get a running stitch. I can change the stitch length here, and I'm just going to use my stylus on my computer and just stitch around here and create a running stitch. It's hard to see.
Yeah. Write it up and put it in the computer. That's a long story.
You can see I'm creating that running stitch. So if you're good at drawing, tracing, or any of that, play with the software. It's very impressive. I've never been someone who could draw. So you see those are the stitches. So that's Sketchbook, built into our software. And I still can't hear anybody when they're trying to talk, so I apologize. I was trying to see if I could wait to go back and do that. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is work with text. So I'm going to go get a new page. And we're going to work with text. Now we have a couple of options with monograms and text. The first thing I'm going to do is go over into the writer portion of this software. And this is just another portion of the software that we have. Let me move my Zoom tools here. And this is where we can go in and do some monograms. So if you go up to the top and select the ABC monograms, you'll see it throws the 3-letter monogram into your hoop. Under Start, I can now click here and go back and add the monograms that I want to, and I'm going to hit Apply. And I'm just going to go down and select the one color, because that's how it's going to stitch, in one color. And now when I go to the font and click down, I have 6 different styles of monograms that I can choose from. So if I click on Antique Monogram and hit Apply, you'll see the sort of like the font changes. That one was already there. I'm going to go to Circle Monogram, and you see it changes it. So that's another style. Garden Monogram is another style. And if you're asking, can I change this font? These are styles for monograms. We're going to be able to change the fonts when we go into another program. But right now, these are just special styles. Monogram 2. And then we have the Victorian monogram. So I'm going to go back up to the antique monogram and apply. And I could change my size if I wanted. If I knew I wanted a 3-inch monogram.
Can you mute yourself, please?
So you can change to a particular height, or you can just click and drag over here and change the size. You can change the density of the stitching. If you're going to use a heavier thread, you can change that. But there's 3 monograms, antique, garden, and Victorian, that give me the option of adding frames. So when I click on the frame, I get 10 different frames that I can choose, and I can just click the frame I want, okay, and there I have a frame around that monogram. So we have that option. If I go down to the Victorian monogram, you'll see the monogram style changed. I can go back into the frames and maybe choose a different frame. Maybe I want this frame. So we have 6 different styles of monograms, and 3 of those styles give you the option to add a frame to it. If you want to change the spacing, you can go in to change the spacing. You see how the letters are further apart now. So you do have the option to change the spacing. So that's the 6 styles of monogram built into the Writer program. And the other thing that's in here are templates. If you want to have something already pre-set up for you, you want text on the right, you want your pattern on the left, or you want text top and bottom, and you want your pattern, it's already, you've got your templates there. We also have the capability here to arc our lettering. This is the only place you can arc the lettering. So you want to remember to go here for that. So I'm just going to go, I should actually get a new page on this. So there is my arced lettering, my picture. I could replace this if I wanted to. Now I'm going to go back to start. Sorry, I was reading. People are sending me text if there's something going wrong. So I can actually select all or select the lettering. And when I go to start, now I have the text at the top and I have the text at the bottom, and I can work with that. So I'm going to select the one at the top, and I'm just going to put Lucy Team. I can go in now and change my font. I have all of these built-in fonts for this software. There are a lot of choices. You know, when people buy software, typically they want to do just a few things. The number one thing is they want to add monograms, they want to add lettering, they want to add fonts, and they want to work with it. Next thing is they want to enlarge and reduce, and they want the capability to go in and do a little bit of digitizing, maybe just to get their feet wet, just enough that they can say that they can digitize. And that's why I actually like this software. It's simple, it's easy to learn. There's not a lot of icons out there that they're not going to use and they don't know how to use and they don't know what to do with them. I'm just changing some of the fonts here. And go back to that. So hit apply. I forget to do that. I'm talking too much. So that's one reason I liked this software. It's just simple. It's straight to the point. It's what people want to do, but if they want to carry it further, you do have all of the digitizing tools that you can do very complex digitizing. You can work with your text. There's a lot of options here. So I've worked with a lot of softwares. This one was the easiest for me to learn, and it does just about everything I want to do in a software. So now I have my arcing, but these are too close together. So I can go over here into the spacing and hit apply and space them out. So you can change that to what you like. Go back and change the font. There, fonts are just something that you can play with. You can get some really cool things from that. So that's with your templates. I'm going to go back and show you one more thing with the templates. The arcing is at the bottom. And when you first go into your software, you may not be able to scroll down completely. You might not can get to this. If you go up to these where it says toggle properties and click on it, and then click again, it will open the window so you can actually see the bottom line. So this is where if I just wanted text top and bottom and I wanted to arc it, we'll go back into monograms or just one line text. But this is where you can arc your text. All right, so I'm going to go back now into Writer Plus. And we're going to talk about text, monograms, and everything here. So I'm going to go get a new page. Let me get this so you can see. And the first thing that we're going to work with is the monogram, because we have different options in this part of the program. So if I click on the down arrow by the T, I have text, monogram, and true type text. So we're going to go to the monograms, and there again is it pops it into the window. I'm now going to go open my properties box, and let me hide this box that I have at the top. I can get this out of the way. Okay, so I'm going back to my properties box, and here where it says text, this is where I can type in my monograms. Now, this doesn't have to be 3 letters. This can be 10 letters, whatever you want, because you're going to see in a minute the monogram style is going to change. So I'm just going to do 3 monograms. I can set my height here. I can go change the font. Now I have the option of all the fonts that are built in to this software. There are a lot of choices of fonts. So just choose a font. And sometimes fonts aren't necessarily letters, they're pictures. And that happened to be true for that one. So I'll go to Billboard, and you can see I can change the font to anything I want it to be. So this is where if you want to work with different styles, you would go into the monogram portion in Writer Plus. There's my sequence. It's all going to stitch out in one color, and we're ready to go. You can adjust the size proportionally and unproportionally here. In order to break these apart and use each one individually, we're going to go into the true type font to do that. That's pretty cool. So that's your monogramming. So the next one I'm going to go into, and I'm going to close some of these because, as I said earlier, I don't like to have 10 or 15 windows open up here. It certainly doesn't bother anything. It just confuses me. All right, so we're going to go now and go into text. So it puts it in the screen for you. In your properties box, you can go over to text and type in anything you want. You can adjust the height here, or you can drag and adjust the height here. I have typed in the word welcome, and I'm going to press enter, and there it is. Now I can increase it, decrease it. Same thing I could do with monograms. I can do here. I can go down and change the color that I'm going to stitch it with. I can go change to my different fonts, and we have the same fonts here that we were using in the monogram, because these are the ones that are built into the software. Look at all the fonts. You know, if somebody's looking for a machine or software and they're just going to do lettering, you need to show them this machine, because there's some a font here that looks like the school. I forgot what it's called. Maybe it's an athletic outline. You can do one letter, but you know, hey, put that on a sweatshirt for the schools.
Wow.
Go back and bring up the whole thing. All right. So that's how you can work with your text. That's just plain text. If you just want to write a book or a sentence or a word, there's your text. So the next one is our true type fonts. And this is where you can really have some fun. So again, I'm going to type in welcome. And now I can go select my font. Now this is going to pick up the fonts that are on your computer. Different brands of computers use different fonts. So who doesn't like Comic Sans? You know, we all like that. So I'm going to choose that. You can choose your style. I'm going to choose bold italic. You can choose your size and click OK. I can change the feel if I just wanted a run line, but I'm going to do the complex feel. And when I click OK, look what happens. Nothing's happened yet. This is sort of like a rubber stamp. The software is waiting on me to tell it where in the hoop I want to position it. So I'm going to move it where I want to position it, and I have left clicked one time and touched enter on the keyboard, and now I have positioned that. And welcome, that's where I live. I live in a little town called Welcome, North Carolina. So now we can actually play with these. These are fun. I've done a lot of things with this. I can break these apart, and now I can work with each letter individually. So I can move it where I want it. I can enlarge it. I can skew it, which is unproportionally working with it. I can change it to a different color. I can go over to my properties. I can change it to a different fill pattern. I can work with each one of these individually. So I'm going to click on the E, and you can really make some funny looking letters. I can rotate, so I can really make these odd. I did a wall hanging. I think it was a 4th of July wall hanging. I did one for the 4th of July, one for Valentine's Day, and I think the word was love, and I just staggered them everywhere. I can go down and change the color that I want to stitch this one out in, and I can play with these. So I now go to the L. So I think you get what I'm doing. I can rotate this and just have fun playing with this. I could make it really, really tiny, change the color. So to me, this is fun because, you know, you can look at something and it just has a word on it, but when you can break apart your letters and play with them and change the fill stitch and the colors and the way they look, I have a good time when I'm working with these. So, and you can just really play with it. So that is your true type fonts and working with those. All right. So sorry I can't take questions. I know you probably have tons of them. I'm afraid if I shut down and come back, it might create more problems. So I want to go ahead and finish the software, and then maybe when I switch over to the machine, I will rejoin and see if I can get the volume back or the voice back so I can hear you. So that's all the things that are under our text. And I think that's pretty much it for the software that we're going to go into. Now I'm going to actually go over to the machine and show you how the LCD screen works. So let me switch my camera. All right, so hopefully you can now see the machine. Let me turn the light off. You're going to get a little bit of glare. And I am taking my USB stick and I'm going to put it into the machine. And I'm going to switch my computer around so I can see make sure I can see what you're seeing. All right, so yes, there's a human here. Hello. So I'm putting the USB stick into the machine that I saved that candle pattern on. All right, so the first thing I want to do to talk about the machine, I'm going to put my camera down here and show you something, is I want to talk about your bobbin case and the bobbins. We recommend the Magna Glide bobbins for this machine. Those are the bobbins that do not have cardboard or plastic. They're just thread only. When you use these bobbins, you want to take out that spring that's in your bobbin case. You want to take that spring out, because what happens is this is nothing but thread, and that thread can get hung on that spring. So take that out, and then we're just putting our thread in the bobbin case, pulling it around through the tension and down under, and then make sure that you put this in the little pigtail. If you don't get it in the pigtail or it comes out, sometimes it'll give you a thread break error on the machine. And it's not that the thread is broken, it's just that it's not in that pigtail. All right. And then of course, put your bobbin in your machine. All right, let me go back up to the screen. All right, turn. So in the screen, when you have your machine threaded and you're threading it, and I apologize again for this glare, there's no way to get around this, but you see these threads, they're hanging loose, and you want to get them so that they're connected over here. You can go on your screen and touch the needles right here. And I know there's a bad glare, but hopefully you can see this. It's not the coming in from the windows, it's just the lights on the machine. You can now go through the different needles here. So needle 1 and needle 2 need to have their thread cut. So I selected needle 2, I'm going to touch and hold, and this is going to now cut that thread, and it has pulled that thread up, now it's secure. So I'm going to do it again on needle number 1, and you can actually watch it down here and see what happens. And you see what it did, it cut that excess thread. So now the threads are tucked back up under here and they're out of your way. I'm going to go back to home and get out of that. A couple more things we can do on this screen. If you want to put it to sleep so that you're walking away, and when you come back, this kind of just shuts the screen down for you so nobody can really come in and mess with anything. And then when you touch home, it comes back up. Over here, if you want to move the frame out so that it comes towards you, maybe you need to do something in the frame area, you can move the hoop. You can also go here and select the hoop that you're going to be working with. We can do this when we bring our pattern up, but I like to go in first and tell the machine, hey, you know what? I'm using the cap hoop, or I'm using the smaller hoop, or I'm using the magnet hoop. So I like to tell it that first. So we're using the larger hoop, and we're going to go home. Now we're going to go select our pattern. Record is where the machine will record. I think it's the last 20 patterns, so it's a quick access to go back and pull up the last 20 that you did. USB is going to take us to our patterns. Candle is our pattern, and we're going to set it. Okay, I've already threaded my machine with my thread colors. Over here is the stitching order that this is going to stitch, but I want to tell my machine what needle I want you to pull that color from. It's so simple. So color number 1, I have that color on needle number 1. And let me show you something here I forgot before I show you this. Maybe these, when you go to your machine, these are not the colors that you're going to be using. If you go to the thread spools, you can now go up here to your needles, and I like to just use the regular color palette, but I can go to needle number 1 and say, you know what, I have this color yellow on it. Needle number 2 is needle number 3. This is the color of my thread. needle number 4, this is the color. Needle number 5, I have that color on. 6, I have blue. 7, I had already done these before, so that's why they're showing up. 7, I have red. And 8, I have the gold. And then I can set that up. Let me go through it. So you can set those on your machine. I'm going to go back to home now. I forgot to show you that. Let me pull that back up. So now I have these set with the colors that I'm going to use. I just touch the sequence, the stitching sequence, and I touch the needle I want it to pull the thread from. Color number 2 is going to pull from needle number 2. Color 3 is on needle 3. Color 4 is on needle 4. Color 5 is on needle 5. And color 6, well, you know, I wanted to do the blue bow, but I think I'd rather have a red bow. I'm just going to tell it to pull the red thread from needle number 7. I don't have to go back in the software and change anything. Color number 7, you know what? I think I want those to be the darker yellow that I had used earlier. So I'm going to tell color number 7 to stitch on needle number 3. And you have a page down. And so this is the last color, which is color number 8. And I could use that, but it's like, you know what? I like the color on needle number 1. I'm going to choose needle number 1 for that. Now I have set my stitching order to my needles. This is so simple to do in this machine. Your stitching order, you just select the needle you want the thread to be pulled from. A couple other options here at the bottom. We can add a stop or a move frame. So if you want the machine to stop, you know, when this starts, it's going to stitch all 8 colors and then it's going to stop. There's no stops in between. But if I'm doing something, maybe an applique, or I need a time where I can go in and work with the pattern, and I want the machine to stop and I want the frame to move forward, I have this icon here. So you're going to select the one previous. You're going to touch the icon, and you see that has put that in there. So now it's going to stitch color number 4, and it's going to stop and move the frame out so I can get in there to trim my threads or whatever I had planned to get in there for. If I want to remove that, touch it, exit, and remove it. What if I just want the machine to stop? I don't need the frame to move. I just want to lay a piece of fabric down and keep going. You do the same thing. You touch above it, you touch the stop, it puts the stop in. You're going to stitch color 1 through 4. The machine's going to stop and wait on you. When you've finished what you're going to do, you're going to hit start again, and the machine's going to pick up at color number 5 and stitch. You want to remove it for some reason, you touch it and touch the X to remove it. All right, so I'm going to go back and tell that, you know, I think I changed my mind again. I want to do a blue bow. We're going to set our pattern. Now it says, well, are you sure this is the hoop you want to use? So you could select it here. Like I said, I prefer to select it at the beginning. And now it wants you to tell the machine where you want to position this pattern. I prefer mine to be in the center. So I always use the center. That's how I'm going to line up my crosshairs. And you know what? There's one thing I forgot to show you. When you go into your needles, and I'm going to have to go back to do that. Just bear with me because this is something I really want to show you. Let me just go back to home. Remember I showed you how you could go into your needles and cut those threads? You need to go and touch the X underneath when you're finished, because this brings your laser back up. If you can see that X, there you go. That actually brings the laser back up for you. Otherwise, you won't have the laser. You got a better view there. All right, so let me go back to home. Sorry, that was important. I needed to show you. So let me go back to the set. So if you're one who wants the machine to go to the far left and start to stitch, so it'll start to stitch here and your pattern will grow this way, or if you need to line it up from any of the sides, you can. I prefer to do it from the center. Now when I hit set, I'm going to have arrows that come up. And what those arrows, what I need to do is tell the software, see that laser? I need to tell the software where I want to position this in my hoop. So I'm moving those blue arrows, and you can see that laser moving. I'm putting that laser in the center. So that's where I wanted it to start. So I hope you can see that. The laser is in the center of my hoop. Now, if you look here, it was moving pretty big. If you touch the green dot in the middle, now when I go and move it, it's very small movements that I'm getting. Sometimes you can't even see it move, it's so small. So you have the option of moving this in large increments or smaller increments. So now I have my laser set where I want to stitch. I am going to touch set, and it's going to trace. Yes. This is going to trace around the design area. It's not giving me a box. It's actually tracing around the area itself. This is nice because if you have one little monogram in there and it's giving you a big box, you really don't know where it's stitching. So this is tracing around the outside perimeter of the design itself. Another thing about the machine, it won't let you make a mistake. If you don't have this positioned correctly and you trace and you do the trace, it's going to give you an error and says, oh, I can't do it there because you're going to be stitching outside of the hoop. You cannot stitch outside of the hoop with this machine. It won't let you when you're doing the tracing. So that is pretty much the screen. You can change your speed. If you want to adjust the speed, you go up to the RPMs and you can change your speed up or down. I was working with a glow-in-the-dark thread, so I reduced my speed for Halloween. And now you're ready to start. And I'm going to just take a couple of stitches because there's something I want to show you. So I'm just going to press start. My machine's going to go over and start to stitch. And I'm going to stop the machine. Because if you get a thread break or you get an issue or something you need to go back and work with, you now have that you can forward 10 stitches. I could go backwards 10 stitches. I can go backwards 1 stitch at a time, or I can go forwards or backwards 100 stitches. So if for some reason you come back and you need to go back over something, or you got a thread break or something happened, you do have the option of going backwards and forwards. Or maybe you just want to forward through something and not stitch it, you can do that.